Hello everybody, hello. Today I would like to talk about a book called Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, commonly known as Alice in Wonderland. I think it gets shortened. Actually, I'm not sure. I think it's because the Disney cartoon's called Alice in Wonderland. Let me just check. Yep, the Disney cartoon that came out in 1951 was called Alice in Wonderland. Also, Tim Burton's remake of the Disney cartoon, which starred a whole bunch of Johnny Depp, Anna Hathaway, and Helena Bonham Carter, and all these others. This came out in 2010. That's also called Alice in Wonderland. So it's a shortening. Generally, people think the book's called Alice in Wonderland. Its actual title is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I'm going to be reviewing it today and also through the looking glass, because why not? Jumble them both together. I bought the book because I was in Waterstones. I saw it on the shelf and I thought, well, that's a classic. That's an English classic. It's on the list, so I better read it, find out what it's all about. I was actually quite curious to read it. I've been meaning to read it for some years because I do like a little bit of silly fantasy. Although I have to admit, I didn't really enjoy it, guys. I've got to say, didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I would. It is, of course, a children's book, and it is a little bit silly. I don't really mind silly nonsense, and I don't really mind children's stories, but this is a children's story which didn't really seem to go anywhere. If we could compare this to Spirited Away, for example. Spirited Away by Hayao Miyazaki, came out in 2001. Japanese anime about a girl. I'm sure you've all seen it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it because it's beautiful and it's brilliant. And I've seen it about, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 times probably, because it's such a great film and it really drags you in really quickly. The opening sequence in particular is genius. Apparently, Hayao Miyazaki just invents this stuff as he goes along. He doesn't even know the end of the story when he begins not only writing the story but animating it. So he just makes it on the cuff. But essentially, they're driving along, little girl in a car with her mum and dad. She's unhappy because they've got to move home, and she's all a bit like, unhappy. So immediately you feel sorry for her. So immediate character attachment. And at the end of the day, stories are all about characters, and you have to sympathise with them. If you don't sympathise with the character, if you don't support them, if you don't rally behind them, then it's hard to get into the story. I can't really say that I really sympathise. I don't dislike Alice in Alice in Wonderland. She's not a bad person. But there's nothing really, I don't know, she is a stranger in a strange world, and she does have all these people saying all this madness to her, and she does want to escape, and you do kind of feel sorry for her, I guess. I don't know, it's just a kid's story. But the point being, Spirited Away is a child's story made for kids, but adults can watch it and they can get a huge amount of enjoyment out of it. As I say, the opening sequence, the girl's in the car, they're driving along, you've sympathized with her straight away, and then they take a wrong turning, and then there's a door, and the dad goes in. She says, no, don't go in, but the dad goes in anyway. She's scared. She goes into the tunnel, and then there's a field, and they cross over the field, and then there's all these buildings, and then there's food, and they start eating, and the whole way she's like, don't go, don't stop it, Dad, let's go home. And their parents just don't listen, and they start eating, and she wanders off. She sees a ghost. She gets scared. She comes back. She sees her parents. They've turned into pigs. She's like, what the hell is going on? Right? She's running around. She's scared. She bumps into somebody. And he's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, I don't know. And then he gives her some food to stop her from turning into a ghost. And then she's got to get into the bathhouse. And then she has another adventure where she's got to make it all the way up to the head honcho, the queen, the evil wizard witch lady. And she's got to ask her for a job. And finally she gets a job, and then the plot settles down. But that's like a 25 minute, half an hour sequence where it's just like boom, 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 and you're pulled into the world quite rapidly. It's genius, I think. Genuine genius. And then, of course, the plot settles down, and then she settles into her life in the bathhouse. and then she's got to figure out a way home. She does that, and you're happy for her in the end. And so anyway, what I'm trying to say is I didn't just dislike this book because I don't like children's stories. Children's stories are okay. I just found this particular story just to be irritating. Okay, just not funny. I didn't laugh at any of the jokes, basically, because this is essentially, it's a comedy book. It doesn't really get classified as a comedy book, but it is supposed to be funny for children. Of course, the story is Lewis Carroll. That's not his actual name. Lewis Carroll is actually called. What's his real name? His name is Charles Ludwig Dodgson. Okay, and Lewis Carroll is his pen name. But anyway, he wrote the story for a little girl called Alice Liddell, as far as I remember off the top of my head, who was the daughter of a family that he was friendly with, and Lewis Carroll grew up in a family with many children. He was an older brother, so he was accustomed to looking after children and telling stories and this kind of thing. So he told this story to this young girl. She liked it. He expanded on the story, gave it to her as a Christmas present, and then they encouraged him to expand it even more. He did. He published it. It became a massive bestseller, and it's one of the most best-selling books of all time in the English language. Massive success, massive cultural influence. Everybody's heard of Alice in Wonderland. Everybody's heard of it. Hardly anyone's read it, but everyone's heard of it. Huge influence on culture. It's kind of supposed to be a comedy. I mean, that's what I got out of it anyway, because the book's all about puns. Essentially, the book is about little girl Alice. Well, I mean, there's two books, but basically the same thing happens. Little girl Alice, she's sitting there in the sunshine with her sister. She sees a white rabbit. She chases after the rabbit. Because the rabbit is wearing a waistcoat and he's looking at his watch. He says, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. She's like, what's going on? She chases after the rabbit, goes down the rabbit hole, falls a really long way down, lands somewhere. She's in a corridor. There's a little door. She doesn't know how to get into it. She drinks a potion, which makes it smaller, but then she left the key for the door on the table. Then she drinks another potion, makes it bigger, and then she cries. And then there's a river of tears. And then boom, 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 all these things happen. Then she meets the different characters from the world through the looking glass. It's the same story. She's sitting there in a room talking to her cat and sees the mirror and says, "Oh, I wonder if I could go through it." She goes through it, ends up in a strange land. In both stories, she interacts with all the characters in these lands. I'm not going to bother telling you the plot because there isn't really much of a plot, right? There's no quest here. It's not like The Hobbit, there and back again. There's no beginning, middle, and end to these stories. It's really just a muddle, which is another reason why I didn't really like it. It's Alice, and she's lost, and she doesn't know where she's going. And even if she tries to go in a particular direction, she'll just end up somewhere else instead because the land is nonsense. It makes no sense. It is a dream world in effect. Both stories are dreams. It's not a supernatural book. People think that it is. People compare it to Narnia or to what's that other Victorian story? I was talking to Presley Benson about this the other day. Secret Garden or something, right? Where you go to a parallel dimension and there's the creatures there are real. Harry Potter would be another example. Like it's not a different planet. It's not heaven. It's not hell. It's just a land which is next door to our land. It's a very Celtic idea, really, because this is the Celts. They believed in this kind of thing. They were in Celtic mythology. They believed in essentially a parallel universe, a ghost land which is layered on top of our land. The Alice in Wonderland is not actually like that. It's a dream. It's dream fiction. But the point I was getting at is that she's lost in this world, and from what I can tell, it's it's supposed to be funny for kids, and so it's puns. It's a lot of puns. And I just don't find the puns to be very funny. It just didn't make me chuckle at all. Maybe it would make a small child 150 years ago laugh. It didn't make me laugh. Maybe I'm just miserable. I don't know. But it's just like, oh God, like whatever. But both books are just full of puns. So essentially, Alice will be walking along. She'll interact with the characters from this dream world that she's in. She doesn't know she's dreaming, but she is. And she'll say something, and they will misinterpret her words, because that's what a pun is. It's a misinterpretation of a word. And they'll tell her that she's stupid, but she knows that she's right. Okay. And I just didn't find it very funny. So there you go. So I didn't really enjoy it very much. But I mean, I can see the beauty of the book. I kind of see what's going on in that it's like she's a child, and as a child growing up, she obviously is going to interact with adults, and they're going to tell her that she's wrong about this, and they're going to try and educate her, and so on and so forth. But in this dream world that she enters into, she's obviously in the right, and the adults that she's talking to, who are basically, talking rabbits and, well, talking chess pieces and talking cards and talking this, that, and the other, Humpty Dumpty and so on and so forth. They're wrong, and she's right. So I guess that would be amusing for a child, especially a Victorian child, because they were quite strict with their children back then, weren't they? Children should be seen and not heard, and so on and so forth. So I guess it would be amusing for, a young Victorian child to be a small girl in an adult's world, but all the adults are just talking absolute nonsense, and none of it makes any sense, and it's all back to front. She's like, well, what's going on here then? And so Alice is the smart one, and the adults are the dumb ones, the dummy-dums, the Tweedledees and the Tweedledums, I suppose. So it's an inversion of roles. She's the adult, I suppose. In the very last story, she becomes the queen. Okay, in Alice in the Looking Glass, she finally becomes the queen. In both stories, they have a queen as the, I don't know, bad guy, I suppose. The chief antagonist, I suppose. Most prominently in the first one, where the queen is... in fact, interestingly, in both books, they're playing with games as well, because the first book is about a deck of cards, which becomes personified, and she's struggling with the queen from the deck of cards, who's famously just running around the place going, off with their heads, off with their heads. She just wants to chop absolutely everybody's heads off. She's a complete psychopath. And then in the second book, she's playing with chess figures. So you have the red queen and the white queen, and their chess figures, and that's what's going on there. So there's a game aspect to it as well. But nonetheless, in both books, she essentially arrives in the world, is lost, doesn't know how to get out, will interact with various different characters. They will guide her towards the queen, or the red queen and the white queen in the second book, right? The royalty, the head honcho, and then she outgrows them. Okay, in the first book, because in the first book you have the whole eat me, drink me, medicine theme going on, where she gets bigger and then she gets smaller. So in the first book, she just gets bigger, and because she gets into some conflict with the queen, and then all the cards are trying to attack her, but she outgrows them, and then she wakes up, and she goes, "Oh, what a strange dream." In the second book, pretty much the same thing happens, right? And then she wakes up. So that's the theme of both books. It's a little girl lost in a dream world. She's the one that's sane. Everybody there is just speaking in misinterpreting all her words. She meets the royalty. She outgrows them. She defeats them. She wakes up. There you go. That's it. Alice in Wonderland, in a nutshell. And you got other characters as well. You got the cat, who's in both. Dina is the name of the cat. In the first book, she starts telling people, she starts telling a mouse that she's got a pet cat, and they don't like that. They get very upset by that. In the second book, the cat is there in the background, and that's she's talking to it, and that's one reason why she goes into the looking glass. So you got that going on, and you got some interesting characters, some iconic characters. I mean, first of all would be the rabbit. Okay, I'm late. The White Rabbit. Everybody knows this is the, down the rabbit hole. You've seen David Icke talk about this. Oh, what's at the bottom of the rabbit hole, right? Break free from the matrix, and see. Well, the reality is at the bottom of the rabbit hole, there's just a giant pile of nonsense, which is totally nonsensical and doesn't make any sense. But there you go. This is a common conspiracy theory phrase to use. It's in the Matrix itself. Okay. In that when Neo, before he becomes Neo, when he's, I forget what his name is at the beginning of the film, but he's just an office worker and he plays with his computers in the evening, doing hacking or whatever, and he's trying to find Morpheus on the internet. And then somebody types something on his screen and tells him, oh, there's going to be a knock on the door, follow the White Rabbit. And that's what he does. Somebody knocks on the door, he gives him something, he gets invited to go to a nightclub, and there's a girl there and she's got a tattoo of a white rabbit on her shoulder. And so he follows them to the nightclub, and then I can't remember the movie, I think she meets Trinity, and then they go through their adventures and then manage to escape from the Matrix and so on and so forth. So it's in the Matrix. The Matrix is, of course, the great conspiracy theory movie of our age, which has blown everybody's mind away. It's a cyberpunk classic. It's a conspiracy theory classic. It has changed the way that people look at the world. Think about it, that period of time, because Eyes Wide Shut wasn't published, wasn't made, that long ago. When did The Matrix come out? Like 1999. Eyes Wide Shut was like 97, something like this. So you got, on the one hand, Stanley Kubrick revealing all the sex club thing, and on the other hand, you've got The Matrix revealing the idea of the Matrix and giant conspiracy and intergalactic aliens controlling the world, and etc., etc. Both books were influenced by Alice in Wonderland. The Matrix, I've just told you. But Eyes Wide Shut, Nicole Kidman, her name is Alice. Okay? So Alice in Wonderland reference. And Tom Cruise, his name is Bill. Right? And Bill is a character in Alice in Wonderland. I thought it was the White Rabbit, but it's not. What happens is she's in Wonderland, and she drinks a potion. It makes her too big, and I think she's in the house of the White Rabbit. And then her arms and legs are like sticking out the windows of the house, and she's stuck and she can't move. And then they send like a lizard down the. Yeah, I just looked it up. They send a lizard down to get her out, to investigate essentially, and she kicks the lizard out. That's Bill the Lizard. And then he appears later on in the book as one of the jurors when they're going through there's a trial because the Queen of Hearts is complaining that somebody stole her tarts, and he's one of the jurors. So he's kind of he plays the role of a worker essentially. It's interesting, isn't it? He's a worker within the Alice in Wonderland world. So, I mean, how does that relate to Eyes Wide Shut? Well, yes, well, Bill works for the elites, I guess, doesn't he? I mean, he is a doctor. He is a servant of all the elites at the sex party that is revealed in that movie. Alice is, the whole story is very interesting. I do think it's one of the greatest movies ever made, if not the greatest movie. Alice is essentially innocent in the movie, as I said. I mean, I just made a video about it. Maybe you guys have seen it, you haven't. But Alice is innocent. Alice does not actually cheat on Bill in the movie. She dreams of cheating, and she confesses her dream of cheating to Bill. But she herself does not cheat. Bill, on the other hand, well, he also doesn't cheat, but he gets a lot closer to it in that he does go back to the prostitute's bedroom and he's about to get it on, and doesn't. There's a lot of mirrors in the book, actually, when you think about it, which is another interesting, like, through the looking glass thing going on there. But he doesn't cheat. So Bill almost drags Alice into Wonderland in Eyes Wide Shut. He is a character of that world. She is not. She is outside it. She doesn't work for those people. He does. So very interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, Alice in Wonderland, massive influence on culture. Everybody's heard of it. It's had an influence on literature with Humpty Dumpty and the portmanteau and the Jabberwocky. Actually, I'll read you the poem of the Jabberwocky, and then I'll tell you about Humpty Dumpty and what a portmanteau is. Yeah, so what happens is, this is in the second book, Through the Looking Glass. Okay, and this is quite interesting. I've just been... Sorry about the nature of these videos. Like, I'll ramble on for a bit, and then I'll go and look at something on the internet and come back. But anyway, I've just been looking this up. So, Alice goes through the looking glass. She's in the looking glass world, okay? She's gone through the mirror. She's on the other side. This is the second book. And there's some chess pieces there, the king and queen chess pieces, and she plays with them for a little bit. And then they can't see her. And then she sees a book lying on the side, and she's like, And she opens the book, and the writing is backwards, okay? And then she realizes, she says, oh, this is a looking glass book. And then she's got to put the book against a mirror in order to read it, okay? And then she reads the poem of the Jabberwocky. But this whole backwards writing thing is just very, very fascinating, because people say that it is a old Illuminati trick, an old secret society trick, in that you write something backwards and then you place it against a mirror, and the person has to put it against a mirror to read it. They say it's a case of inversion, the idea being that you invert Christian beliefs. Of course, Satanism itself is essentially an inversion of the Bible. Basically, you read the Bible backwards. So instead of God being the hero, the devil is the hero, right? Satanism is really just it's Christianity but backwards, essentially. And this method was used famously at the Rothschilds' 1972 Surrealist Ball, which you can look up, in which Salvador Dali himself attended. Interestingly enough, Salvador Dali, the Surrealist, okay? Where did the Surrealists get their inspiration from? Partly from the Marquis de Sade, who wrote Justine, which I've read. And I'll have to do a video about it at some point. That is a horrific story. The only reason I read it was because E. Michael Jones bangs on about it in his book Libido Dominandi, where he talks about how, you're either controlled by lust or you're controlled by God, right? And how lust is used as a system of control to control the masses. And he talks about Israel invading Lebanon, and when they do, they take over the TV stations and they just play pornography on all the televisions. Why do they do this? They do this in order to sedate the masses. So he makes the point that pornography is something which will... it's the opium of the masses, essentially. It's not liberation. It's a form of totalitarian control. And he points out that the French Revolution was in part inspired by the Marquis de Sade. I don't know if this is really true, but certainly he wrote some of his books around that time. Justine was written around about that time, very popular, and played a role in the events of the French Revolution. And it's a horrific book. It's a book about a young woman who is very naive and sincere and wholesome, and she wants to do the right thing, and she just gets raped repeatedly by various different people, and then meets a horrible end at the end of the book. There's it's a tragedy, really. There's no redemption for her. There's no good ending for her. She is just beaten and abused, and then she dies. It's a horrible book. full of sodomy as well. But the Marquis de Sade famously was a sodomist. He did not like vaginas. He didn't like vaginas. And of course, as you know, the word sadism comes from Marquis de Sade. So, what a guy. Imagine being such an arsehole that you literally have a word named after you, sadistic. Like that word comes from your name. Imagine being that kind of guy. I guess like Brutus, right? Brutal comes from Brutus, isn't it? But anyway, I chose the name Brutus because he's the founder of England, not because he murdered Caesar. That's a different Brutus. But anyway, point being, what was the point? The point being that the Surrealists, Salvador Dali's Surrealist movement was in part inspired by the Marquis de Sade. I'm not entirely sure about the connection, but they revered him. Okay. Interestingly enough, he pops up in The Invisibles by Grant Morrison, comic book which I keep talking about as being an inspiration for The Matrix. Okay, The Matrix had two major inspiration books. First of all, you have William Gibson's Neuromancer. Secondly, you have Grant Morrison's Invisibles, a 90s graphic novel published by Vertigo, involving a group of people fighting against interdimensional lizards. And one of the heroes of the story is the Marquis de Sade, who gets transported from the past into the future. And they reference 100 Days of Sodom, that utterly the other horrific book that he wrote. If the Marquis de Sade basically wrote two horrific books, Justine and 100 Days of Sodom. 100 Days of Sodom was turned into a movie. I've never seen it, but it's just some barbaric stuff. But anyway, point being, the Surrealists loved this guy. Salvador Dali loved this guy, and he was part of the Rothschild Ball. And in the Rothschild Ball, they used backwards writing on the invitation to the 1972 Surrealist Rothschild Ball. All very strange stuff. Where did they get that idea from? Did they get it from Alice in Wonderland, or is it something older? Obviously, when it comes to Alice in Wonderland, the question pops up, is this a pedophile book? Is this a pedo book? Because you've got a young girl by herself. Where are her parents? Where are her guardians? She's wandering around. She's lost. She's alone. She's vulnerable. You know what I mean? And the rumor is, it's never been proven, but the rumor is, of course, that Lewis Carroll wanted to marry Alice Liddell, the child that he wrote the book for. And she would have been 11 years old at the time, and he would have been 31 years old. And so in the Victorian period, the age of consent was 12. This was changed later on in the Victorian period because of, I always forget her name. What's her name? Okay, I just looked it up. Guess who told me the answer? Grok. That's right. Grok is slowly replacing Google as a source of information. It's just easier because you get a direct answer. If you type this thing into Google, it will present you with an article, and the information may be in the article or it may not. But I just type into Grok. I just say, what do I type? Which feminist changed the age of consent in Victorian England? And it comes up straight away. Josephine Butler. I've read it. I did a video on her on a previous channel. My memory's rubbish, so I forget it. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I found out about this because I was looking into feminism. Feminism, in my mind, begins with Mary Wollstonecraft and ends with Rotherham. Okay, the experiment has failed. The women have failed to protect young women. We saw the reaction to Rotherham, and what did the feminists do? Nothing, right? But anyway, point being, first wave feminism was primarily concerned with coverture. So coverture was a system of laws whereby the husband basically had legal control over the wife. The wife was considered to be part and parcel of the husband. In the same way that children are kind of like legally bound to parents, the wife would be legally bound to the husband. So the first goal, before they even got onto universal suffrage and giving women the vote, the suffragettes and all of that, the first goal of feminism was to overcome the laws of coverture. Josephine Butler was a key character in that, and she also campaigned for the end of child prostitution and human trafficking. And this was a huge scandal at the end of the Victorian period. Basically, young English girls were being bought and sold off to the Belgians. And there was a famous journalist who goes by the name of William Thomas Stead, who wrote for the Pall Mall Gazette, and he purchased a 13-year-old girl from her mother for £5 and wrote a whole article about it. The subsequent outcry led to the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885, which raised the age of consent from 13 to 16. So apparently the age of consent was 13. I don't know, I thought it was 12. In Blackstone's Book of Common Law, it's 12. I don't know, I don't know all the details of this. But anyway, yeah, anyway, point being, Lewis Carroll, maybe he wanted to marry Alice Liddell, or maybe he didn't, we don't know, okay? But it would have been outrageous. It might not necessarily have been against the law if he'd have married her when she was 12 or 13, but nonetheless, it would have been considered to be outrageous in Victorian society. And whatever happened, we don't know what happened, but he fell out with the family. He fell out with her, and he fell out with the family. He kept a diary, and the pages of the diary from that period of time are missing, which is very suspicious. There's also, he took a lot of nude photos. He took a lot of nude photos of young, prepubescent girls. All right? And I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Like, by today's standards, that is considered very, very strange indeed. Apparently, in Victorian times, it wasn't considered that weird. It was considered quasi-normal. I don't know what to say about this. I do know, like, having traveled to India, you do see, like, you see naked kids running around, okay? Like young kids, all right? Boys and girls, nude. I mean, I'm talking like 5 years old or whatever. Like they walk around naked. It's not considered to be a big deal. So whereas in our culture, I mean, you just don't see that anymore. I don't know. In the 90s, did you see that kind of thing? Not really. I mean, I guess since Jimmy Savile, it's just everybody's terrified of pedos, probably quite rightfully, and because of Rotherham and all that, you know, whatever. But anyway, point being, Lewis Carroll liked to take photographs and draw pictures of young naked girls, and he fell out with the family for some reason, and I don't think he married. No, he never married. Apparently, he did have relationships with, normal, like, older women of his own age. There was some romantic interest with different ladies, but the family kind of covered this up because that would have been considered a little bit scandalous at that time. So, but whatever the case, he didn't marry. He was a lifelong bachelor, and he liked to draw pictures. He liked to take photographs of young naked girls. And he fell out with the Liddell family for some reason, and he fell out with Alice Liddell for some reason. So there's always this it's never been proven, but there's always been this kind of like pedo myth surrounding Alice in Wonderland, and so it makes you wonder, like, how does this all connect with Eyes Wide Shut and with the Rothschilds and like I say, how we got onto this subject matter, talking about the second book, Through the Looking Glass. Alice is there. She goes to the looking glass. She sees a book on the table. It's written backwards. She's got to look in a mirror to read the poem. It's the poem of the Jabberwocky. And this is a method. This was used in the invitation to the Rothschild 1972 Surrealist Ball. So, was he a pedo? Are the Rothschilds pedos? Is Alice in Wonderland a classic bit of paedophile English literature. I don't know. It's never really been proven, but the unfortunately, the rumor is there in the background, and it looks quite suspicious. And we don't have this kind of same thing for, as I mentioned before, Spirited Away. This is a book about a young girl lost in another world, but I don't think there are any accusations of paedophilia in that book. So I don't know. I mean, you've got the other children's story that springs to mind about a girl that's lost in a foreign world. Would be I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. The Yellow Brick Road story, Dorothy, right? Yeah, the Yellow Brick Road, Wonderful Wizard of Oz, by L. Frank Baum. I haven't figured out how to pronounce that. Baum. Anyway, published in 1900. And you have the story of Dorothy. She's got to find the Emerald City. She's got to find the Wizard of Oz. She wants to go back to Kansas. This story is an American story, children's classic, and apparently it's all about the gold standard, essentially. It's a rebellion against fiat currency. It's actually more complicated than that, because this was in the progressive era, and there's a whole debate about whether you should have silver as the real money or gold as the real money. It was a bit confusing, but roughly speaking, it was a book that was in favor of gold standard and the silver standard to back the American dollar. They didn't really have a dollar at that point. This was known as the free banking period. So, I mean, brief history of America. You have the American Revolution. They established the first Bank of America, Central Bank. It had a charter for 20 years. It ran out. The Americans didn't want another central bank, so we invaded, burned down the White House, and they created the Second Bank of America. It also had a charter for 20 years. And they wanted to redo the charter. Jackson stood against it. He famously said, "You are a den of vipers. I will wipe you out." They tried to assassinate him twice. Failed. He got into power, crushed the Central Bank of America, and created what was known as the free banking era. This lasted like 50 years or whatever, until Woodrow Wilson, the father of the New World Order, created the Fed in 1913. Okay, and the value of the dollar is decreased by about 99.9% since that time. And in fact, the whole world lives under the dominion of the petrodollar now. That we live in the age of the dollar, the petrodollar. America prints as much money as it wants, and it basically exports its inflation to other countries, because every other country in the world has to have dollars in order to engage in international trade, and specifically in order to buy oil. And if you disagree with this, like Gaddafi did, then America will blow your country to pieces. It may be that this system is collapsing now because Russia is trading with China in oil, and they're not using the dollar. So this system is wobbling now, and there's so much debt floating in the air that maybe it's all going to come crashing down at some point. We don't know. But anyway, point being, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was sort of about the fiat currency and the gold standard. I am, of course, a gold bug. I believe in gold, even though I trade Forex as a hobby. The only reason I trade Forex is, like, if you can't beat them, lose them. Lose them? If you can't beat them, join them. Okay? It is a scam, but there you go. Everything's a scam, right? Fiat currency is a scam, but you need a bank account. So what can you do? You've got to compromise. So the point being, my friends, that The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was sort of about that. Okay, because you've got Oz, which is a weight. You've got the Yellow Brick Road, which is gold. Okay, you've got the lion, who represents the political class, which is actually very cowardly. You've got the Scarecrow, which represents the farmers, but they're stupid. You've got the Iron Man, who represents the industry, but he's got no heart, right? And you've got the Wicked Witch of the East, and whatever. I'll read it and we'll do an analysis of that some other time. But she's a young girl in a strange land, okay, by herself, just like Alice. right? That's the point I'm making here. And interestingly enough, right, here's another point. I don't think Bohm was a pedo, but I think perhaps what happens is that pedos just like these children's books, and they turn them into pedo books. I mean, as I say, Lewis Carroll, it's very suspicious. With The Wizard of Oz, I don't think Bohm was a pedo. Maybe he just picked a girl for the story. I don't know. He could have picked a boy. He picked a girl. I don't know. But what interestingly enough, in the original book, Alice's shoes are silver. In the movie, Alice's shoes are red. Right? And you know she clicks her shoes to go back to Kansas, right? Okay, so just went on a bit of a tangent there. Again, who got me the answer? Grok. Well done, Grok. Google is dead. If you want to find anything else out, just ask Grok. You can go to Yandex. Yandex will still give you interesting websites. I remember 10 years ago, you used to be able to Google stuff. A whole bunch of crazy, interesting conspiracy theory websites would turn up. Doesn't happen anymore with Google, but it does with Yandex. Actually, I don't know, because when you ask Grok a question, it will link to a bunch of websites, and I haven't tried clicking on them. So maybe Grok will present you with interesting websites as well. Anyway, point being that the whole red shoe thing is part of the Pizzagate conspiracy. Okay, I believe in Pizzagate. I'm a believer. I remember when this story broke in 2016. It was disgusting. I thought it would burn the whole establishment down, but it didn't, because the energy from that revelation, the leaked John Podesta emails, it got transferred into the QAnon movement, which went nowhere. And it turned all into like gobbledygooky mishmash mush, and essentially just erased the fury. That's the way these people work. But nonetheless, John Podesta collects artwork, and I've found the name of the artist. The artist is called Biljana Djurdjevic. Now, so that's Biljana Djurdjevic. Okay, she likes to draw pictures of little kids wearing red shoes, and these children will be like tied to a chair or whatever, or hanging from the wall or whatever, like just weird, creepy ass stuff, and they're wearing red shoes for whatever reason. And there's also a photo of John Podesta and a whole bunch of other guys wearing suits, and they're all wearing red shoes. Okay, there's a picture of the Pope wearing red shoes. Dorothy, as I said, was wearing red shoes. She's a girl alone in a strange world, vulnerable. She's wearing red shoes. She's not wearing red shoes in the original book, but she is in the movie, right? Is it a Disney movie? Probably, I don't know. I can't be bothered to check. I'm going to guess that it is. Interestingly enough, Daily Stormer, right? World's #1 neo-Nazi website. Remember when Andrew Anglin created the Daily Stormer book club, led by a allegedly reformed homosexual guy? What the fuck was that guy's name called? Asmanoff. So they started the Daily Stormer book club, and you know what the fashion item they had to wear to be part of the club? A red shoe. What does it mean? I don't know, guys, but it's weird, right? So anyway, what's this all got to do with Alice in Wonderland? I'm just making the point that I don't know what my point is. People say it's a pedo book. Alice is alone. She's in this strange world by herself. She's vulnerable. So, and you got the rumors surrounding Lewis Carroll. When it comes to The Wizard of Oz, I don't think that was originally a pedo book, but I guess the pedos, they pick up on it and then they turn it into a pedo book, right? And as I say, through the looking glass, she goes through the looking glass. She's reading the poem of the Jabberwocky. It's a nonsense poem, but it's written backwards, and in order to read it, she has to go to the mirror and see its reflection in the mirror. And mirrors have got a long history of, being involved with the occult. People say that demons travel through mirrors. I got to be honest with you, I think mirrors are magic, okay? I'm on the magic mirror platform. It's embarrassing to admit this, but I'm just going to come out and say it, right? You've all seen these videos, probably. You've all seen these videos on the internet of people, and they get an object, and they put it on top of a piece of paper, on top of the mirror, and then you can look, and you can see that object reflected in the mirror. And you got a whole bunch of young teenagers, a lot of it girls. A lot of this is the pure, innocent curiosity of young teenagers. And they're humble enough. They don't have the arrogance of like, I'm a scientist, I understand everything. No, they're humble enough just to say, what the fuck is this? How does this even make sense? Okay, they're following their intuition. And I think they're spot on. I think mirrors are magic. I think you can test this yourself. Get yourself a mirror, get an object, put it on top of a piece of paper, press it against the mirror, and then look, and you'll see that object reflected in the mirror. How does the mirror know it's there? How does the light go all the way flipping round backwards, and the light's literally got to curve round in a circle in order for it to be reflected in the mirror? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. So I think mirrors are weird. I think they're magical. I think modern science does not actually explain how they work, to be honest with you. I know that's quite a broad statement, but the thing about science is a religion. Most people don't actually follow science. Real science is engineering. That's all it is. Science is very, very good at building technology because that is engineering. When it comes to explaining supernatural phenomena, or when it comes to explaining the weather, or when it comes to explaining people, or the further you get away from engineering, the worse science becomes. And there are all kinds of things out there which are totally unexplained. But you point this out to a scientist, and they'll just go, "Hey, well, science explains everything." No, it doesn't. It's just engineering. It's just engineering which has been turned into a religion, essentially. So there's my little ramble about mirrors. I could just pause this video now and go on along down a rabbit hole. Let's go down a rabbit hole and look about inverted writing in mirrors. I mean, I just had a look, and it says Leonardo da Vinci apparently wrote a lot of notes in this way, so obviously a character involved with the Renaissance. And mirror writing calligraphy was popular in the Ottoman Empire and carried mystical associations. So there's a whole rabbit hole to go down there. I mean, interestingly enough, the whole Ottoman Empire thing, well, you look at Eyes Wide Shut and you go in. Once he goes, by the way, the mansion in which Eyes Wide Shut is filmed is a Rothschild mansion, an actual real Rothschild mansion, which he rented to make the movie. So, yeah. And inside, the style of the mansion is, I forget the exact name for it. I'm not going to bother to look it up, but it's like Oriental, it's like Moorish revival, I think. Yeah, it's Moorish revival. So Moorish, Muslim, Ottoman Empire, okay, revival. So there's the connection there to the east. And again, the connection to the bathhouse. We look at Epstein's Island. What is that building? That is a Ottoman Empire bathhouse, essentially. We look at, what was that guy's name that got killed? Like, he supposedly committed suicide. He was an actor in Hollywood, trying to expose child paedophilia. He had a video. Anyway, it was a dead man switch. They killed him. The video came out, and it's children in a bathhouse, essentially, in a Hollywood bathhouse, somewhere in Hollywood. So this is what's going on, guys. This is what's going on. Lots of weird pedo stuff. But anyway, I was going to read you the poem of the Jabberwocky, so let's do that for the last 10 minutes. Try and get away from all the pedo stuff. The Jabberwocky. I can't read. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths old grabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch." Anyway, I'm not going to read you the whole thing. That's the first two verses. Point being, she reads this poem, and then she moves on through the world, and then later on she bumps into Humpty Dumpty from the nursery rhyme. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Okay. Originally in the nursery rhyme, Humpty wasn't an egg. Nobody knew what he was. But anyway, some people say he was a cannon that fell in a battle and couldn't be put together again. Whatever. In Through the Looking Glass, he's an egg. But he starts to explain the Jabberwocky poem, and he specifically explains the word slithy. I think it's slithy. Yeah, slithy. And he says that slithy is a portmanteau. A portmanteau is, you take two words, you put it together, and you make a new word. So slithy is slimy and lithe, I think. Yeah, so it means like fast and slimy, basically. So, and this word portmanteau, I mean, this is a word that people use now to explain all kinds of words. So I just can't think off the top of my head. Hang on. Yeah, so smog is smoke and fog. Brunch is breakfast and lunch. Motel is a motor hotel. Chillax, chill and relax, etc., etc. Anyway, I don't want to look anything else up. Sorry, I went a little bit too much down the rabbit hole in this video. Usually I just like to sit and talk. For whatever reason, I've been clicking and stopping this video all the way through to look stuff up. But anyway, the last thing I looked up is nonce. So a nonce word is a nonsense word. And Through the Looking Glass is a book of nonsense literature. This is what it is. A lot of the words are made up. The story is nonsense. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. It's all over the place. It's doobity-da, right? And obviously nonce is a word which is used by Northerners to describe paedophiles. So how did that connection happen, right? It's like this flipping book, dude. It's just got pedo written all over it. Like, oh my God. Yeah. So there you go. Alice in Wonderland. A girl has a dream. She goes to a strange land, and it's a piece of dream fiction. Very, very influential. We all recognise Humpty Dumpty. We all recognise the White Rabbit. We recognise the Queen of Hearts. We recognise Tweedledee and Tweedledum, right? We recognise the Walrus as well. We recognise the drink me, get smaller, eat me, get bigger, that whole dynamic. But unfortunately, yeah, quite a weird, kind of strange, kind of slightly creepy book. Slightly creepy book. I mean, let's be honest here. Johnny Depp, right? Johnny Depp was involved with this book. Johnny Depp is I'm so tempted now just to open up Wikipedia and but I don't want to do that. We've got a few minutes left to go. But Johnny Depp, man, weird guy, involved in a lot of weird movies. He also did the interpretation of, he did Sweeney Todd, didn't he? But he also did From Hell. I'm pretty sure he did From Hell. Okay, I lied. I did look it up. Let's talk about Johnny Depp. This guy is such a freak. Oh my God, he did From Hell, which is about Jack the Ripper. Okay, so another psychopath. Okay, probably involved with Masonic murdering of prostitutes and so on and so forth. Okay, Alan Moore, of course, did the book From Hell, graphic novel, turned into a movie. Basically, his idea is that the Jack the Ripper murders were Masonic murders. So he did that. Okay, he did Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay, so Nightmares, horror movie. All right, not such a big deal. But he did. Let's have a look at what else he did. He did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, based on the book by Hunter S. Thompson. He plays Hunter S. Thompson. This book is famous for talking about adrenochrome. Okay, and adrenochrome, as they say, you torture the small child. The child is very agitated, and then you get the blood out, and then because it's full of adrenaline and what have you, it becomes a hallucinogenic drug. This is right there in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Oh my god. Yeah, lots of crazy stuff. Yeah, lots of collaborations with Tim Burton. And I don't know. I mean, is the guy nonce? I don't know. But I mean, when it comes to the whole Amber Heard thing, sorry to have to side with the raging feminist, unwashed, but he does have a point, because some of the stuff that he did to Amber Heard was totally psychotic, like sticking glass up her vagina and beating the crap out of her and just being generally very, very, very abusive and very, very violent. And somehow or another he's gotten away with it, and he's the hero. And all the e-celebs, they never really looked into the story. We're supposed to live in the age of the internet, and it's supposed to be a case of the group, right, can see all the evidence. We're supposed to bypass the mass media, but that didn't happen at all. All that happened is you get a bunch of TikTok videos of the trial making Amber Heard look stupid and Johnny Depp look good, and all of the commentators just jumped on board with this, and they were like, yeah, Johnny Depp, our hero. Oh, that fucking bitch Amber Heard. No, nobody actually looked at the trial. Nobody actually heard any of the testimonies. Nobody actually listened to what this guy actually did to her. The nasty, nasty stuff that he did to her. It's just real, genuine mob instinct. And it's mob instinct coming from people who pretend to be outside the mass media and who pretend to be, free thinkers and alternative thinkers and so on and so forth. It's quite dark. So anyway, Johnny Depp, and of course he did Alice in Wonderland, right? So I don't know, man. I don't know what to say. Weird pedo book. I didn't really enjoy it that much. But there you go. I mean, it is a classic. It's part of our heritage. It's part of the English canon. I don't know. Like, it's the more time you spend reading and you go through the classics, the more you just stumble across weird stuff, weird shit, which is there. This is one of those books. Marquis de Sade's Justine would be another one. Lolita is another one, which I read this year. I didn't realize it was such a dirty pedo book. Honestly, I knew it was a book about underage sex. I thought the girl was 16 because I saw the Stanley Kubrick movie. Obviously, Stanley Kubrick did Eyes Wide Shut, so I saw the movie. I'm a big Kubrick fan, so I watched it. It was okay. I kind of enjoyed it. I tried rewatching it again. Actually, I just found it to be boring, but whatever. In the movie, like the first scene, it's Lolita, and she's she's in a prom, so she's like 16, roughly 16 or whatever in the movie. So it's an older guy with a 16-year-old, not good, but also not totally psychotically weird. This is something we've seen in Trainspotting with Ewan McGregor and the girl he picks up at the nightclub. Well, it's a very funny scene. He picks her up, takes her home, has sex with her. She makes him sleep in the corridor, and then in the morning, he finds out it's like she's a schoolgirl. It's like, whoa, dude, right? This movie came out in the 90s. Nobody was really upset about it. Nobody was screeching, saying this is pedophilia. People, it wasn't good, but nobody was tearing their hair out about it, right? If they made that movie today, everybody would go insane. But in the 90s, attitudes towards sex were different. There's another movie called Rita and Sue and Bob 2. This is a kitchen sink movie from the 80s about a guy who basically has sex with two schoolgirl babysitters, right? It's incredible. You watch this film, it's absolutely incredible because the wife finds out. She goes she has a screaming match with one of these girls in the middle of the street and calls her a slag for sleeping with her husband. This is like a 15-year-old girl, and her husband's like 30 something. And there's no conception of, like, she's not shy about it. She's not like, oh my God, he's going to go to jail for being a pedo or whatever. She literally calls the schoolgirl a slag for seducing her husband. So totally different sexual attitude in the 80s. So I read Lolita. I thought it would be something like that. But it's not. The girl's 12. And it's like, oh, it doesn't describe it in any graphic detail. But it's like, oh, fuck. Like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking crazy book. And, of course, lolly now is a term that pedos use to describe prepubescent young boyish girls, or boyish-looking girls, because they're undeveloped. And he describes this in great detail in the book Lolita. It's like he likes her because she looks like a boy. You know, so I don't know, guys. I don't know. You want to read English literature, there's all this weird shit out there. And I guess Alice in Wonderland is one of those books. And I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. I read it, though. You know, there you go. Was Lewis Carroll actually a pedo? Did he actually try to seduce Alice Liddell? Or was he just a lifelong bachelor who liked children, wrote a nice storybook for kids, and now he's being accused of being a pedo, and the pedos have kind of picked up this work and ingrained it in part of their kind of weird Illuminati pedo culture? Who knows? I guess we'll never know, right? But it is very strange that he fell out with the family, and he did like to take photographs of naked children. Like, it's a bit weird, right? It's a bit weird. I don't know what else to say. 1 hour and 1 minute. But there you go. Done it. Read it. Tick that box. Don't have to read it again. Job done. So thank you very much for listening. God bless. Have a nice day.